The finals game easily had genuinely one of, and if not the most hyped FPS game releases of 2023. Back in November of 2023, the finals open beta ended with a total of 7.5 million different players. Definitely the largest shooter beta playtest in gaming last year, with little contest from other FPS game betas like XDefiant. Then, literally 1 month later on December 7th, the game was fully released, and the hype was also incredible once again. Huge names in FPS games like Shroud, Asu, and It's Timmy all enjoyed the game for hours on end live on stream, and honestly, they had some great comments about the game's current state and future potential. The finals even hit record numbers on Steam, reaching the top 5 spot for most played games in the month of December. It was looking massively polished, and it was a nice fresh change from other FPS games we've gotten used to playing over the years, like Apex Legends, Call of Duty, Overwatch, and even Rainbow Six Siege. Fans from all of these major games flocked to the finals because it had a little piece of every game mentioned in a nice fresh blend. What this game brought to the table was truly turn-of-the-century innovative gaming technology that we really hadn't seen anywhere else in gaming before. Literally, it's the first ever FPS to be released on the Unreal Engine 5. This is what most of its unique qualities can actually be attributed to. The incredible coin explosion graphics when killing enemies, a completely destructible environment, interactive and grabbable foliage and furniture, rocket riding canisters, bee-hopping mechanics. It all comes down to the potential that the Unreal 5 game engine brings to the table. On top of this, the game format is pristine. There are playstyles for almost anyone that enjoys FPS games. You can dash around the map like Tracer from Overwatch, grapple into the skies like Pathfinder from Apex Legends, demolish and pummel buildings and walls like you can in Rainbow Six Siege. It's all here, and that's one of the main reasons it's been such a widely loved game. Up until now. After the game's release and the honeymoon phase veil was lifted from our eyes, players began to notice a lot of inconsistencies within the game, and others began to exploit them, and I mean detrimentally. There are some fundamental errors and game-breaking mechanics that were very soon found out once a lot of players started to hit the 100-hour playtime mark. Each class within the game had something very exploitable, and it caused a lot of people to turn their heads away from the game entirely. The heavy class was the most apparent issue. Fundamentally, it's understandable and even somewhat excusable that the slowest and largest class in the game has the most HP. Yeah, that's usually how tank classes work in video games. These classes are typically meant to soak up majority of the damage caused by enemy teams, but in the finals game, that isn't the only thing the heavy class is good for. Not only does this class have 200 more overall health than the light class, but they also have the most damage potential out of any class in the entire game. Terrifying. The heavy C4 nuke meta appeared, and it was bad. The heavy class's C4 had potential to wipe out an entire enemy team when attached to one singular explosive barrel. It doesn't even matter if the enemy team had 3 heavy players. If they were close enough to each other, they all could have easily been taken out with one click of a button. This was bad, and I mean so bad that top streamers and professional esports players quit the game altogether in droves. One C4 nuke had the potential to completely change the pace of a fight at any given time, and it's a game mechanic that can be exploited by even a 10-year-old with 2 left thumbs. This wasn't the end of the meta wars though, sadly. Players that enjoyed running other classes more than they did playing heavy also had to figure out how they could compete with something like a nuclear-grade missile being launched at them, so they adapted. The light class were the first players to find a somehow even more broken loadout combo. The strongest weapon in their arsenal was the double-barrel shotgun. Now, at first glance, this weapon is incredibly strong, but equally as strong as it was difficult to use. The light class has the smallest health pool in the entire game, and the weapon was only viable if you were somehow lucky enough to get extremely close to your target. So, when combined with the majority of the abilities in the game, it's pretty hard to get great utility out of it. But there's one specific ability in the game that is so busted it almost guarantees you a kill anytime you combined it with a double-barrel shotgun. The light class cloaking device. The cloaking device made any light player almost completely invisible at any given moment in the game. You can cloak immediately after shooting, you can recloak a split second after someone shoots you out of cloak, and the regen for the ability is just ignorantly fast. Basically, you have the potential to almost always be invisible in the game. Now, how does this aid to your double barrel loadout? It's simple. Cloak and hide. Wait for enemies to fall into your range, or sneak up behind them completely off the radar, and boom. freest kill you'll get in modern gaming. Everyone hated it, except the complete nerds that only cared about winning that next match to climb the ranked ladder. Light players left and right dropped all of their unique movement kits, impressive melee loadouts, and skillful snipers for this new, completely dull and boring playstyle. But it was the only way they could genuinely have an impact against the titan of a heavy class. But while the light class was cooking, there was one more class that had been taking an insanely large beating, and they were honestly fed up. More medium players started to sacrifice their healing beam ability for the next, far more broken item in their arsenal, the Recon Senses ability. Recon Senses has shifted taking fights in the finals game astronomically. If you were going up against a Recon user, your location could be revealed to them for up to 30 seconds at a time, meaning no, there's nowhere that you could run to in order for them to not find you. Being pre-fired around corners before you even peek, chased to the end of the map when you were the last surviving player on your team, or even snuck up on from behind while hiding to play for your health regen. These are all game-shifting plays that would never have previously been possible without the introduction of wall hacks into the game. But naturally, people leaning to the Recon Senses loadout could just be seen as another way to keep up with the aggressive shift that the game's meta had been undergoing. Now, these meta changes are a large contributor to the massive chasm of a deficit left in the game's initial player base, but there are also other gripes that are genuinely warranted complaints from players who just want to see the game reach its maximum potential. A lot of players felt that there wasn't much variety to the game after months of playtesting and a full release. The game's two major game modes, Bank It and Cash Grab, quickly became monotonous in the sense that there just should be more ways to play. Other games have a key game mode, yes, like Counter-Strike's legendary bomb defusal or Overwatch's point capture, but there's also a lot of map variety that can attribute to things like creating strategies within certain maps, and it helps retain a sort of fresh playstyle from map to map. But in the finals game, the core map topography tends to just be an empty set of buildings. For majority of the maps, that's just it. Empty buildings with empty floors left players with empty strategies. This definitely made map variation feel almost non-existent, which is far from the case in other games like Counter-Strike's DE Nuke versus DE Inferno. Another case that we saw a good amount of the player base fall victim to was the explosion extravaganza. This time, I don't just mean the heavy C4 nukes. The game simply has too many explosions at its core. Obviously, the game is built around environmental destruction, but there are just simply too many ways for players to take free damage points, seemingly out of nowhere. Explosive barrels hanging from the sky and around every corner, explosive weapons in-game like multiple grenade launchers, RPGs, C4, frag grenades, explosive mines, and even explosive players like when the Dead Go Boom event is active. It just cuts into firefights extremely intrusively. It feels like you have to prepare more for an explosion play more often than you do a genuine firefight in the game, which we can all agree that at its core just takes away from the shooter aspect of the game altogether. There are a few more minute changes that the game could most definitely polish out as well, but these core issues most certainly need to be addressed before we're likely to see a revival of majority of the game's original player base. There are also some absolutely necessary changes. These changes may come as a shock to some of you watching this video, but there are some serious restrictions that should be placed within the game's current state in order for it to feel more polished, playable, and fresh once again. For starters, each of the three classes in the game has a very specific item or ability that needs to be completely removed. These are game shift items, or items that if you don't have them on your team, it's basically make or break. For the light class, like I mentioned earlier, the cloak ability needs to go altogether. It's not even one of the coolest or most unique abilities on the light class side. If anything, it's the most boring one with zero movement perks, and it also just completely changes the light class's overall impact. This tends to be more obvious in game modes like Ranked, where if you ever even get the chance to see a light player in the finals round, he was most certainly running Cloak. For the medium class, the Recon Senses ability needs to be removed altogether, no questions. The developer team has tried balancing it multiple times now, nerfing the distance that you can see enemies at, or nerfing the uptime of wall hacks, but honestly, it just needs to be removed. It adds a completely new level of intel to the game that can't be achieved by any other class or ability in the game, so it's another game shift item, or make or break ability easily. And finally, for the heavy class, the most obvious item that needs to poof is the heavy C4. The finals development team also tried their hand at tuning this as well, but a military grade nuke in the hands of a contestant just isn't right, especially considering the damage capability far outweighs any other item in the game. Nuke the nukes. Another intuitive change that the game could make to challenge the meta creep would be more rank restrictions. I've put a lot of thought into how this could actually be executed, and The most intuitive form I could think of was the following. Each team can either only have one class per team, so no double heavy or double medium meta, or if you have two of the same class on one team, neither of those teammates can utilize any of the same abilities or gadgets as each other, main weapons being the exception. So, for example, if you have two medium players on your team, they cannot both run Healing Beam and the Revive defib. This would force each player to play a more specific role within their classes, which would naturally make for more variety within the fights you'd see in ranked. Variety is incredibly important in games like these, so there are definitely other measures we would like to see being taken to enhance this feature. The solo banquet mode that they released for a limited time was a great example of game variety, and they most certainly should lean more into creating unique game modes that have a fresh feel to them. On top of this, the map variety should be polished as well. As it stands, the most unique maps in the game are currently Vegas and Seoul, being the only maps that don't have the same copy-paste buildings plastered everywhere mindlessly. But if you look slightly closer, even Vegas is just one large unique building pasted into four corners of the map. The developers of the finals game definitely have it in them to create some genuine changes that could revitalize the game, seeing as how they have already pushed multiple patches and updates to help combat the meta creep that the game's experiencing. But I fear that they might be a little too afraid of changing some of the game's core mechanics, like removing things altogether, seeing as how they haven't simply just disabled heavy C4 until they can find a good spot for it, but have tried dialing it back multiple times instead. The game has a lot of potential to come out on top for 2024 as a breakout shooter and even top game of the year, but there's definitely a lot of work that needs to be done underneath the hood before that. My final thoughts for the game would be that the game's ideas are incredible and very forward moving. The movement is extremely satisfying, core gunplay feels smooth, and there's unique outplay potential within every single class in the game. They all have their unique strengths, as they should. The core cash grab game mode is incredibly unique as well, and adds a last chance win element that previous games don't really tailor to, which I love personally. And the environmental destruction to this degree is turn of the century gaming technology. I still can't wrap my mind around how they literally made every single wall and floorboard interactive. There are positives and negatives within every game that we play, and in the end, it's up to the community to recognize these issues and up to the developers to mold the future direction of the game. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more FPS gaming content. Much love, goats, and thanks for joining me in the dojo. Peace and love.